important. And it's neither been asked in PSI, it's not been asked in GS also. But it's been in the news, which is where is it now? The freebies and the freebies and the Revadi culture. Some people pronounce it as Revadi, some people will pronounce it as Revadi. You can just, I think in UPSC, they would only say UPSC. Oh, sorry, freebies. In UPSC, they would say freebies. In the US and other places, I'll make you right. They have a different word for this. It's known as state handouts. So that is what Gramsci and others also talk about. Why this became important? So 2022, just prior to the elections, you had Prime Minister Modi talk about Revadi culture. It was a problem in relation to the freebies that are being handed out in India, especially before elections. Revadi, you understand what it is? Like whenever there is when it's just like a small sweet. You know what it is? These sweets are there, no? These kind of sweets, right? So what happens is anytime, so Revadi is whenever there's a festival in India or you have some engagement or something, it is given out freely to everyone that comes. Like you pick it out from a packet and you give it to everyone. So it's a freebie in that sense. And this is what he said, that just before elections, these are given out, like TVs and other things given out as free. Policies also. And Prime Minister Modi then called it the Revadi culture. But it has been in the news before that also. One of the things that has been said by RBI in the State of the States report, and one recent report also that they came out with, is you saw what happened in Sri Lanka, the financial crisis. And they said a large number of Indian states are also going through the same problem because of the freebie culture. So Punjab, because they give free electricity and they give free water, has a lot more freebies that is completely impacting their revenue. Same happened in Kerala. They're saying Delhi is also moving towards that direction. This freebie culture that the governments are indulging in, it is creating a lot more problems in terms of fiscal imbalances within the balance sheet of the state governments. The problem within PSIR is, how do you see freebies? In relation to welfare. And it's a question I also asked them. Giving a TV, is it welfare or is it a freebie? Or giving a cycle to a girl student, is it a freebie or a welfare? Giving food security, free ration under PDS and others, is it welfare or a freebie? In Karnataka, giving allowing women to ride freely on the buses, is it a welfare scheme or is it a freebie? You get the problem. It's very difficult then to define. So what we'll do is study it from a PSI perspective. So from a PSI perspective, we would look at how Rawls talks about this. We would look at how Gramsci talks about this. We'd look at through Amartya Sen's, which approach? Amartya Sen's capability approach on what he says on this. And then there's one old Roman thinker, Juvenal. He becomes a very good introduction you can write here. And I'll make you write. It's one line that you can bring in from him. He's not a PSI thinker overall, but he has given a very famous line, which is used in the US and other places, which can be used within India. Any question on freebies and welfare. Then we'll also do it from a GS perspective. So first would be the judicial view. Right. So there is the, what do you call this? The Subraminam Balaji case. So there's a Subraminam Balaji case that we'll talk about. And recently there's the Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. So this is currently being heard by the Supreme Court. So the Balaji case has already been done. The guidelines of the Balaji case that the Supreme Court gave is now part of the election PCI or the Model Code of Conduct. It is in relation to freebies. It has actually started in Tamil Nadu. So in Tamil Nadu at that time, DMK and AIDMK would give free TV and other things before the elections. And the case was filed in the Supreme Court. Is it freebie or is it not? So we'll talk about what the view of the Supreme Court was on this. And then the Supreme Court gave certain guidelines on how freebies should be seen through the model code of conduct, which was then updated by the Election Commission. Recently, after the Prime Minister made the Revadi culture argument, you had Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay. He's a lawyer, but he's very close to the ruling party. He filed a petition within the Supreme Court in relation to freebies. And this is a specific constitutional article that we'll talk about. But because the verdict has not come from the Supreme Court, so we'll have to wait and see as to what is the view of the Supreme Court on this. And obviously, then we'll talk about the views. So we'll talk about the views of Election Commission of India, the Finance Commission, the National Human Rights Commission, what they have said, and various other views in relation to freebies, including obviously RBI, what the RBI has said on this issue. These two become much more important that you can use in your GS. This PSIR. Conceptually, is it clear? But if it's not asked this year, you can expect the question to be there next year. And maybe it may not be asked both in GS and PSIR at the same moment. So it's something that would be important for you coming for either this year mains examination or next year's mains examination. Any doubts on this? No. Or just first write down Revadi culture or Revadi culture. REWADI. REWADI. It was used by the Prime Minister. It was used by the Prime Minister to highlight the problem of freebies, to highlight the problem of freebies, to highlight the problem of freebies given by state governments, in 2022, given by state governments in 2022. In 2022. Subsequently, a petition has been filed in the Supreme Court. A petition has been filed in the Supreme Court in the Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. In the Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. The Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. On the legality of freebies. On the legality of freebies. On the legality of freebies promised by political parties in India. Legality of freebies promised by political parties in India before elections. Before elections. Before elections. Before elections. Before elections. Before elections. So I'll make you write Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case separately also. But this is something you can write as an introduction in GS itself, if the question does come up on it. Write down theoretical perspective. Theoretical perspective. Theoretical perspective. Theoretical perspective. So the first one, obviously, John Rawls. So what would you think of freebies? See, the point is in the US, so when we talk about all of these thinkers, they don't use the term freebies there. The term that is used in the US and other places is state handouts. But I'll make you write this. In the US, you also have a concept known as welfare queen. It's a very derogatory term. What used to happen is when these state handout policies was introduced within the US, the major beneficiaries of these programs, of freebies, or you can say state handouts, or affirmative action in this cases, was the Black community within the US. So within the 70s and 80s, especially in the 90s, it became very popular. Uh, People started calling Black women that took benefits of all of these schemes as welfare queen, meaning these people are living on welfare, handouts that has been given by the US government. So you're taking taxpayer money from the white population and giving it indirectly to the black. So it was used as a derogatory term against the black population. It should not be used within PSIR, within UPSC itself. So the term that is technically used there is state handouts. Okay. Right now, Rawls does not assess state handouts. Rawls does not assess state handouts. State handouts. State handouts as inherently good or bad, as inherently good or bad, as inherently good or bad, inherently good or bad. They are to be judged, they are to be judged, they are to be judged on their contribution, on their contribution. They are to be judged on their contribution to a just society. Contribution to a just society. Right? So that is a core aspect of Rawls. What does he want to achieve with origin, position, veil of ignorance, and difference principle? A just society. And freebies, therefore, inherently are not good or bad. If they lead to a just society, it is fine. If they don't lead to a just society, it's not. So inherently, whether freebies should be given or not, that is not the actual problem. What is the problem if they don't lead to a just society, or whether they lead to a just society? Write down. If state handouts, if the state handouts in the form of welfare, if the state handouts in the form of welfare, basic income, or public services, welfare, basic income, or public services, improve the situation, improve the situation, improve the situation of the least advantaged members of society, improve the situation of the least advantaged members of society, least advantaged members of society. They are justified, they are justified, they are justified under the difference principle. They are justified under the difference principle. Under the difference principle. Under the difference principle. They are justified under the difference principle. So this is something Rawls himself talks about, this concept of state handouts within the difference principle. This is something Amartya Sen also talks about. So when he wrote the book, The Idea of Justice, Amartya Sen talks about Rawls and his idea of the difference principle, and whether the freebie culture in India, does it allow for that within the difference principle? So Amartya Sen does take a very different view from Rawls on this, on the idea of freebies. For Rawls, the basic idea is it should lead to a just society. It should end up helping the least advantaged, right? And if it helps the least advantaged, it is justified under difference principle. It is justified under difference principle. Basic direct connection 2 is theory which we have talked about. State handouts should not create, state handouts should not create dependency, should not create dependency, should not create dependency or undermine societal cooperation, or undermine societal cooperation, should not create dependency or undermine societal cooperation or distort the social contract, or distort the social contract, or distort the social contract envisioned in the original position, envisioned in the original position, envisioned in the original position, envisioned in the original position. So basic idea is you're in the original position. You have come up with a basic social contract that a least advantaged person would be provided would be provided certain things as part of the difference principle. End of the day, if it helps the least advantaged person, these freebies or state handouts are fine because we decided this as part of the social contract. It is justified in the difference principle. But any freebie that distorts the original social contract. So sometimes we talk about that bailouts that the United States did after the 2008 financial crisis. Socialism for the rich, capitalism for the poor. Let the poorest compete with each other to get services, but let us bail out the rich. So socialism for the rich. So freebies or state handouts are not meant for the rich. It is not meant for them to get more richer because nobody decided that in the, presumably in the original social contract. If you're a billionaire, you lost money. You lost money. Why should I, as a taxpayer, bail you out? The basic idea is that Anil Ambani lost money. Should he be given taxpayer money to start his business? No. The point is, that is how capitalism works. There is no social, or should not be any socialism for the rich in those situations. I'll give you another example. Within India, and we'll talk about this, it's the argument that is coming up later. Hospitals are made, schools are made, engineering colleges are made, medical colleges are made, in which subsidized property is provided, subsidized electricity is provided, subsidized water is provided by the state itself. But you don't decrease the salary, the fees. So what has happened is that the rich have been subsidized, but the people who require those services, such as, let's say, the medical services in those hospitals, they don't have insurance, they're turned away. Or it's extremely unaffordable for them. That is what Niti Aayog has also said, that the maximum expenditure, out-of-pocket expenditure within India is medical expenses. And this is a problem that happens, whereby have the people of India, what is our social contract? The preamble, right? The preamble is our social contract, we the people of India. Have we decided that we are going to give subsidies to the rich in India? No, that is not what India decided. But this is what happens in India. So all of these are therefore a distortion of the social contract. Conceptually, is that clear? Any doubts? Like in the US, you have the US Constitution, which is their social contract. It also starts with the line, we the people. They have the First Amendment, freedom of speech, absolute freedom of speech. So if somebody is put behind jail for what they have written on Telegram or TikTok or other places, is it a breakdown of the social contract? So freebies or welfare in the same manner can distort the social contract that people have entered into. This is what Rawls talk about. So freebies or state handouts should not allow that to occur. Any doubts? Conceptually, you can link it to Rawls' theory of justice. Write down the next thinker, Gramsci. Gramsci. Like in relation to Rawls, this argument was also made in relation to the gas subsidy that we get on the cylinders. A poor person also gets it, but Mukesh Ambani also gets it. This works under the difference principle. The gas subsidy is only meant for the poor. But is he also a least advantaged person? So in that way, what you're then doing is distorting the social contract. It comes to another point that I'll make you right, which is means tested. That freebies and other things have to be means tested. It comes from economics. Write down Gramsci. Gramsci views liberal welfareism. Gramsci views liberal welfareism or state handouts. Gramsci views liberal welfareism or state handouts as means for the ruling class, as means of the ruling class to maintain control, to maintain control, to maintain control, and reinforce the dominance, and reinforce the dominance, and reinforce the dominance over the working class, or reinforce the dominance over the working class, reinforce the dominance over the working class. In his theory of hegemony, in his theory of hegemony, in his theory of hegemony, Gramsci argues, in his theory of hegemony, Gramsci argues that the ruling class, Gramsci argues that the ruling class maintains its power, maintains its power, maintains its power also through cultural, maintains its powers also through cultural and ideological means. Ideological means to create consent, to create consent, to create consent among the oppressed classes, to create consent among the oppressed classes, to create consent among the oppressed classes for the existing social order, for the existing social order, for the existing social order. Liberal welfareism or state handouts, liberal welfareism or state handouts, liberal welfareism or state handouts is part of the strategy, is part of the strategy to secure consent, to secure consent, to secure consent of the working class, of the working class, of the working class by providing limited relief, the working class by providing limited relief without challenging, limited relief without challenging the underlying, without challenging the underlying, without challenging the underlying structures of inequality, without challenging the underlying structures of inequality, inequality. It prevents revolution. It prevents revolution. Prevents revolution. Prevents revolution. You know, there's a, in world history, you've heard of, what was that French woman? If they don't have bread, let them have cake. I'm getting her name. And something, whatever her name was. What if she had given bread? Would the people have revolted? Rather than making the argument, let them have cake, what if she actually did give Antonio married something? What if she did end up giving bread to the people? Would they have revolted in that situation? So what Gramsci, and what done Gramsci, we've talked about his theory of hegemony and other things. So Gramsci makes the argument that why are these liberal welfare policies or state handouts being provided? So that the working class remains satisfied. They remain satisfied, so they don't undertake a revolution. They don't think about changing the social order. if you keep them satisfied enough, rather than looking at their own equalities, they would look for the handouts. But right on the next thinker, Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen. So Amartya Sen has the main, you can say the main philosophical justification on how freebies should be seen. Right down. Because his argument was also used recently in the Subraminam Balaji case also. The capability approach. People asked, it was asked in GS paper 3, I think 2013 or 15 or something. It had to do with the Subraminam Balaji case also. That his capability approach was used to see freebies and why freebies were not banned in India by the Supreme Court in the Subraminam Balaji case. Right now, different philosophies offer competing answers. Different philosophies offer competing answers to maximize public welfare, to maximize public welfare, to maximize public welfare, maximize public welfare. Utilitarianism of Bentham argues that public expenditure should maximize the utility or the well-being of citizens. Maximize the utility or the well-being of citizens. 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 So Bentham, who have done, like we did in liberalism, what is the problem with this approach? Maximum happiness. So have freebies give, that gives maximum happiness. What is the problem with this approach? Simplest. How should freebies be done? If they give the maximum happiness to the maximum utility, actually, that the people are able to utilize it to their maximum extent. And you distribute it as a freebie. People now can use mobile phones. Is it a luxury or is it essential? It's becoming essential, right? So distribute it to everyone as part of public welfare. Maybe people would grow out of this in the sense it would lead to much more economic output. The consequence of that can be the same. It's the same reason why we, Shamik Ravi, she's, I think in the Economic Advisory Council, she said, she recently came out with a report and it says that the amount of the multiplier effect of roads, like if you construct a road in a village, it has a multiplier effect in terms of the economic output. Meaning you construct a road, people are much more likely to then engage with greater supply chains. So the product that they're producing in the villages, they're able to export it, and then they can get much more return in terms of imports. So it has a much bigger multiplier effect. So those aspects of welfare are better than the freebies that are provided. But what is then the problem with Bentham's argument here, or utilitarian argument here? Not really. It's the criticism that is actually given by Amartya Sen itself. He talks about it in development as freedom. We've done this, like we've talked about the critique of these principles. What is it? So that is Amartya Sen's argument. What is the problem with this utilitarian argument? Because that is what is done in India. In Karnataka, free rights to women, but you increase the prices for the men by double to pay for it. So what is the main argument that comes out of this? or problem that comes out of this. It's the problem that India faces, because with popular freebies, popular welfareism is what the utilitarian argue. And this is what India has largely done in terms of freebies, but it has caused massive problems within India. This is what Amartya Sen really talks or is very critical of. It goes back into the socialist argument. You're going to undertake these freebies till that time you have somebody else's money. And you're going to run out of money at the end of the day. And this is what the freebies have done in India, whereby you have given these free electricity, free water, all of these in Punjab, Kerala, other places. Maximum utility, maximum happiness. People are utilizing it. They're very happy also, they're not paying. But what has happened? The states have gone bankrupt. Happiness is very difficult to, first of all, quantify or even qualify. Like, what is maximum happiness for the maximum people? The second problem is, even if you do it on a very large scale, do you have the revenue to do this? People would be happy with free electricity, free water, but does your revenue support it at the end of the day? So in all of these are then aspects of freebies, because it doesn't actually lead to the welfare of the people. Conceptually, you get, and this is the critique that Amartya Sen also writes in his book, Development as Freedom. And then he comes up with the idea of capability approach. Do you get the problem? Okay. It's the same problem that we're facing in India. Nothing is ever free. Right? When we talk about freebies, nothing is free. Somebody has to pay somewhere in doing all of this. Why are the oil prices still very high? Because during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time, there was a massive increase in the oil prices of barrel. It went from, I think, $30 per barrel to almost $120 within few years itself after the Iraq war. So they came out with oil bonds. I'll not pay you today. I'll pay you in the future. So the oil prices were kept low, but now we have very high oil prices. Even if the international market, the oil prices reduce, we still pay high prices because we're still paying for those bonds. It's an IOU, basically. The future generation would end up paying for this. I take a lot of loans. Who would pay? My son would pay, or my daughter would pay. Conceptually, you get the problem with this right now. Amartya Sen in Development as Freedom, Amartya Sen in Development as Freedom criticizes it. Amartya Sen in Development as Freedom criticizes it. He argues that public welfare must be evaluated. Public welfare must be evaluated by the extent it enhances the freedom of individuals, their individual capabilities, and their individual capabilities to pursue by themselves the outcomes they value, to pursue by themselves the outcome they value, the outcome they value, the outcome they value. Therefore, public welfare is not good or bad, is not good or bad, is not good or bad, is not good or bad. It should not be seen as a measure, it should not be seen as a measure of economic growth, or maximizing utility, but rather it improves the capability but rather it improves the capability of an individual to pursue their desired outcomes, pursue their desired outcome. Pursue the desired outcome. So what Amartya Sen then says, you're not giving freebies or public welfare for utility, right? It's not a means to an end. Neither it is, you should see it whether it would lead to economic growth or not. But how should you judge whether it is welfare or freebie? You should judge whether it enhances the ability of the individual to pursue the desired outcomes that he values. Pursue the desired outcome that he values. This is what we've done in theory of justice also, when we talked about his capability approach. Now, if you were to now look at the various policies within India in terms of the freebies and welfare debate, let's say this policy in Karnataka to give women free bus rides. Is it a freebie or a welfare? Does it enhance the capability of the woman to pursue what they desire or the outcome that they desire? Hmm. Yes. So a person who may have money is also utilizing it. The argument, so if you were to look at it from a utilitarian perspective, you would end up saying that it is being utilized by those that don't require it. Right? That is the argument they're making, that rich women are also using it. First of all, rich women would not use buses. It's generally lower middle class or at max middle class that would end up using it. Even within that, some may have the capability of paying for the bus, but the government has decided not to have that. So what you're looking at from a utility perspective, you can look at it that rich women, they're excluded because it is not a utility to them. So you excluded a particular group of women. Why? Because on the economic parameters. So in terms of utilities, you look at the scheme very differently. In the same way, let's say you talk about the cylinder subsidies that is given in India. If we look at it from the utility principle, is it good or bad? Why? So again, it goes back into the, it is being used by the rich. You're subsidizing the rich. So the utility of being used by the poor, that is there. They're getting the subsidy. It is improving their lives. It is improving their livelihood. But the rich are also being. So why you have rejected this policy? Because it is being utilized by the rich. This is a very utility-led perspective. And Amartya Sen says that this is a wrong way to look at this. Now, if we were to take the same examples of buses or cylinders, and you look at it from a capability approach, does giving women, irrespective of the fact rich women also being, does it enhance their ability to pursue goals or things? Yes. It also allows the rich woman to also pursue, right? It doesn't matter that they can pay or not, because then you're going into the utility principle. Does it allow them to pursue what they desire, which is to go to work, which is to have a safe space also? Because now a lot more women would be using the services. It provides them with a greater safe space. So does it improve their capability? Yes. It doesn't matter whether rich women are being given it or not, because at the end of the day, their capability would also be improved to pursue what they desire. The argument of, he basically in his books actually gives During that time, a large number of, especially Nitish Kumar and Bihar at that time, he introduced a policy of giving free bicycles to schoolgirls, but not to boys. To schoolgirls, they were given. And in UP, Akhilesh Yadav was there. And Akhilesh Yadav gave laptops to all school students, all of them. And it was seen whether it is a freebie or welfare. Does it have utility? Yes. Can others actually afford it? Yes. A large number of school students in UP could afford it. A large number of women, girls in Bihar could afford cycles. So from a utility principle, it goes back again to the same argument that you're providing a freebie to the rich, and therefore it should not be done. You should have means tested and all of this. Amartya Sen says it is, you're looking at it the wrong way. Does it enhance the capability? In the same argument, you can make that the cycle cannot be used by disabled people. They're being excluded. So it's not a good policy. If it's just based on the utility principle, he gives the example that bicycles cannot be used by the disabled person. It cannot be used by old people. It cannot be used by others. The roads are not good. So how would they utilize it? So you're looking at from a utility principle, and based on that, public welfare becomes difficult to undertake. Because now you're presuming how the people would use it or not use it. You're finding reason not to have public welfare. But he says, look at it from a capability approach. End of the day, is this scheme that the government has launched, does it improve the capability of the individuals to which it is being provided? So in that sense, yes, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or not. Does it, is the goal to allow people to enhance their capabilities to achieve what they desire. So in that way, it is good. Then it comes to another problem, which is what happened in the Balaji case in Tamil Nadu. TVs. It's a problem of his capability approach also, because then everything can have some sort of capability and desire that an individual can achieve, but it may not be completely for everyone. Like giving free mobile phones in India, definitely a capability approach. It would really enhance everyone's capability to achieve what they desire. You get the problem of his approach also. How would democracy therefore work in this? In terms of capability approach, how would democracy work on this? In all of this, it's an argument that was in the Balaji case also, and this is something that Amartya Sen then later writes. In a democracy, people decide welfare. Right? In a social contract of Rawls, people decide that this is the basic difference principle, this is to be provided. But in capability approach, you have made it very individualistic. That I as an individual would decide whether it improves my capability or not. So a cycle for a disabled person may not improve his capability. But for somebody who can afford it, again, it would not improve. Somebody who has a motorcycle or a car, not improve. So it is a very small group of people who would it improve for capability. But you have decided that it would be judged on, therefore, individualistic basis. But democracy works on a collective principle. So it becomes in direct confrontation with Rawls' argument of difference principle. How do you then judge the capabilities? That the same thing would improve capability of some, but not of others. Any doubts? Right on the last thinker, Juvenal. Juvenal was a Roman poet, who came with the phrase, bread and circuses, came with the phrase bread and circuses. Bread and circuses. Bread and circuses. It is used to describe, it is used to describe, it is used to describe public approval of public policy, public approval of public policy, not through excellent public service, not through excellent or exemplary public service, not through excellent or exemplary public service, but rather diversion, distractions, but rather diversion, distractions, diversion, distractions of bread and circuses, of bread and circuses, of bread and circuses, bread and circuses, bread and circuses. So Juvenal is actually has the most, you can say, appropriate perspective on freebies versus welfare. And he was a Roman poet, and he wrote around the time when Rome was crumbling. Like there's a famous line that the Rome was crumbling, but I think Caesar, whoever the leader was playing the pipe, but everything around him was being crushed. And this is what he talks about in his poem, that the Roman Empire is collapsing around the people. But how have the leaders made them happy? By giving them bread and by showing them circuses. What were the circuses? The gladiators and the other things. So the people were extremely happy. They had broken roads. Circus. They had broken roads. Public service was not available, but the people were happy. Why were they happy? They got free bread. And that time, Rome used to give free wheat. And there were a lot of gladiator tournaments and basically circuses, which kept the people happy. He ends up saying that the people are extremely selfish, that they want immediate satisfaction rather than long-term growth. I'm happy as long as I get my wheat for today. I'm happy as long as I see a circus or a gladiator tournament. And he says that people are therefore selfish because you can see that Rome and the Roman Empire is collapsing around you. And you don't really care about this. Right now, he considers that the common people, or sorry, he condemns the selfishness. He condemns the selfishness of the common people. Selfishness of the common people for neglecting the wider concerns, neglecting the wider concerns of their civic duty, wider concerns of their civic duty, wider concerns of their civic duty, wider concerns of their civic duties, wider concerns of their civic duties. And that's it. So it goes back to Kerala, Punjab, other states in India. You knew that free electricity and free water is going to run out. Same thing happens in Delhi. It's not sustainable as a model. Nothing is free. Nothing is ever free. It's going to run out. Somebody is paying for all of this, whether it's your future generation or debt or whatever it is. So the people, according to Juvenal, the people are selfish. What you care about is your immediate satisfaction rather than your longer civic duty, which is to ensure that in that case, the Roman Empire survives, Rome survives. Or in India's case, long-term economic growth of India, the long-term sustainability of such models within India. Concept is clear? Yeah, so, but that you're ignoring your civic duty end of the day, no? It's not as if people are not aware. And secondly, the rulers would do what the rulers intend to do, which is to gain political power. So if they can do it by giving free wheat into the Roman Empire and handling circuses, gladiator tournaments, and other things. The people are happy. They maintain their political power. This goes back to what Gramsci ends up saying. Maintaining hegemony. How? Through consent. How are you making consent? By giving freebies. People are not questioning. People will not undertake a revolution as long as they're getting free electricity, they're getting this free, that free, other things that are free. But somebody has to pay for this at the end of the day. So whether your future generations pay, a small minority within India that pays direct income taxes or corporate taxes, but it has to come out of somebody's pocket. Any doubts on this? So within that sense, food security, is it welfare or freebie? We've done the four theories. Based on them, is it welfare or freebie? Leaving theory aside, what does common sense say? Hmm? Then, to an extent, it is welfare. India has a huge BPL population. A large part of their out-of-pocket expenditure goes into food and other things. And it makes sense for India to provide this as a welfare mechanism. The other problem, it happens in Haryana, 68% fake ration cards. I mentioned this in class before. Why are they there? In Haryana, it has the largest number of rural crorepati's. The state, rural-wise, is much better off as compared to the rest of India. Why do they do this? They get free ration. They don't eat it themselves because it's of low quality. They feed it to the cows, to the cattle. So it's free ration for the cattle. And the milk is then sold. So the input cost becomes very low, but the output that you're earning from this by selling the milk is good for them. So 68% fake ration cards within Haryana. The government is aware of this. Everyone is aware of this. So that is a misuse of welfare that is going towards freebies. The leakage and the other issues that happen with welfare schemes within India, in Manrega and other places also. But distributing before the elections, TVs and other things, those are freebies. It's not free, first of all. Second is when we talk about free electricity and free water, is it then freebie or welfare? One of the RBI reports says the main reason why states are falling into debt, it is because of free electricity that they're giving through discoms. The main source of state debt is this, especially in Punjab. So how is it then a freebie or a welfare mechanism? Why would it be a freebie? If you look at it from Gramsci's perspective, is it to build consent so that you maintain political power? You look at it from Juvenal's perspective, is it just bread and circuses to maintain political power? Does it improve the capability? Yes. So in that way, it does improve the capability. But it's very difficult to then, everything can become public welfare in that situation. And Rawls, is it a difference principle that we decided? People voted for it, so they can update the social contract. They continue to vote for this. And that is what theory, I've said this before when we started with PSIR first law. What is the role of theory? Truth, to reach the truth. But in social sciences, there's no absolute truth. What happens is you have a puzzle. So every theory fills a small part of the puzzle so you can understand the truth better. So you can understand from Gramsci's perspective, Juvenal's perspective, Rawls' perspective, Amartya Sen's perspective. Have you reached the truth with any single one of them? No. With all four of them? No. But it helps you understand the situation better. And that is what is the primary purpose of theory. Any doubts? No. But write down separate subheading. So these are the 4 thinkers you have to write in PSIR. Judicial view in India. 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 Write down. The Subraminam Balaji case 2013. The Subraminam Balaji case 2013. The Subraminam Balaji case 2013 is now an annexure. Is now an annexure. Is now an annexure. Annexure to the model code of conduct. To the model code of conduct. It states that manifestos cannot contain. It states that manifestos cannot contain anything against the ideas and principles of the Constitution, against the ideas and principles of the Constitution. Next point. Welfare schemes should not contravene. Welfare schemes should not contravene. CONTRAVENE. Contravene the purity of the election process. 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 Write down the next one. Manifestos should reflect the rationale of welfare promises, the rationale of welfare promises, rationale of the welfare promises, rationale of the welfare promises, and the manner in which they will be financed, and the manner in which they will be financed. Manner in which they will be financed. So this is in relation to freebies and welfares. So it happened when in Tamil Nadu, the AIDMK, DMK, they basically started giving TVs and other things. Now it is not done. But the argument that was made is, if you're going to put anything in the manifesto that you're going to give this scheme, first write in the manifesto how you're going to finance it. But that is easy to do. Right? You can say that we'll borrow it from the state, we'll borrow it from here. It's not wrong. And the court cannot say, oh, this is the wrong way of financing, or this is an inappropriate way of financing. You can't take the political parties to the court for this. The second issue is it should not be seen contravening the Constitution, which is fine. Like, you cannot promise anything that goes against the purview of Constitution. But it's a particular problem, which we'll talk about in the Upadhayay case, Article 282. Article 282 allows the union and state, it's written in the Constitution, 282 allows the union and state to utilize revenues for public purposes. Utilize revenue for public purposes. But public purposes has not been directly defined. It was defined in the Bhim Singh case. I'll make you write it. The argument is Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay is making the argument that this Article 282, under which these freebies or welfare schemes are announced, that you can use state and union revenues for public purposes, is it contravening the Constitution? These freebie schemes that you're announcing. So we'll have to wait and see that the Supreme Court take the call on this. But I'll make you write what is Article 282 and what was the verdict in the Bhim Singh case. Secondly, the Aam Aadmi Party before the Delhi elections promised free electricity, free water, not a problem. In Karnataka, the Congress promised, what was that scheme where they were giving money to women? Stop, Vijay, something. This stopped now, right? It's not a problem because Article 282 allows you to do that. And you can say that your financing would come from taxes and other things. It cannot be upheld as being illegal in front of the court itself. So the Supreme Court in the Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case is also going to revisit the guidelines that it has provided in the Subraminam Balaji case. Maybe, let's see whether they would give them more tooth for implementation. No, that is true of fund itself. Right down. The Supreme Court also gave the verdict. The Supreme Court also gave the verdict, same case, also gave the verdict that promise of distributing goods if elected, promise of distributing goods if elected, promise of distributing goods if elected is not bribery, is not bribery, is not bribery. The Supreme Court took the view, that every promise in a manifesto was intended to induce the voter, to induce the voter. So the parties in India, they can say that I'm going to give you a free laptop. Before the Bihar elections, it was said that we'll give you this. I think one of the more famous statement I saw was of Akhilesh Yadav when he gave laptops. So he became the chief minister for the first time, and it came out in the news that Mulayam Singh Yadav was like, this is not really helpful. People are not going to vote for you because you gave them laptops. And he did lose the election after that. And so everyone went back to the original formula, which is caste, which allows for votes to happen. And this is the problem in India. Freebies can get you to induce voters, maybe for a short while, but in the long term, it is not beneficial. And goes back to what Juvenal says, people are selfish. They look for immediate benefits. If you're giving me an Oppo phone and another is giving me iPhone, I'll go with the iPhone. Now, I won't care what is about my civic duties. What I care about is what I'm achieving in all of this. So you really can't blame completely the people on this. It is it's the political culture who've done this in comparative politics. The idea of political culture is the problem of the culture that it takes time to imbibe civic duties. We've talked about Hannah Arendt's idea of civic action. It takes time to imbibe all of these values, whereby people are willing to reject all of this for the greater good. Right on. In the Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case, the Supreme Court is hearing challenges against the practice of offering and distributing freebies during election campaigns. The petitioner has argued that freebies violate Article 266, which bars BARS, which bars the misappropriation, of funds, from the consolidated fund of the union and the state, from the consolidated fund of the union and the state. The union and the state. Further, it violates Article 282. Further, it violates Article 282 that allows the union and states, to utilize revenues, for a public service. Utilize revenue for a public service. In the Bhim Singh case, BHIM, Bhim Singh case, in the Bhim Singh case, the Supreme Court gave a broad interpretation of public purposes, of public services, which is to further DPSP, or political, social and economic justice, in the preamble. While in the Subraminam Balaji case, the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court tied public purpose to the broad concept of improving livelihood. Improving livelihood. So what Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay is basically saying, Article 266, it ends up saying that you cannot misappropriate funds from the consolidated fund, right? Misuse those funds. And he says that these freebies, and if you're undertaking money for these freebies, it is misappropriation of this fund. So the Supreme Court would decide whether it is misappropriation or not. The second thing is in relation to Article 282. Now, under 282, the union and states can spend revenues for public purposes. So the Supreme Court in the Bhim Singh case ended up saying, what is public purpose? Anything that can be done for DPSP, anything that can be done for political, social, and economic justice, that is given in the preamble. So it's very broad. It basically means everything. Maternity relief is in DPSP. Environmental protection is in DPSP. Equal pay is in DPSP. So it has a very broad meaning in all of this. Even within the concept of the preamble, then cycles also, free electricity also, the scheme for women, basic income and others, all of that can be justified through the Bhim Singh case. In the Balaji case, the Supreme Court said the public purpose can, actually that is where you find the capability approach of Amartya Sen being highlighted by the Supreme Court in the Balaji case, Subraminam Balaji case, that it has to improve the livelihood. So they tie this concept of improving livelihood with Amartya Sen's idea of capability approach. Meaning, what do you mean by improving livelihood? It improves the capability of individuals to achieve their desired outcomes. Conceptually, is it clear? Any doubts? But we'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court says in the Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. It's not public purpose. The freebies are not public purpose. So in that case, the Supreme Court, if they do it, they have to have a very narrow definition of what public purpose for here would mean. Yeah. Because they have, right now they have a very broad meaning. So all the freebies can fit into that situation. I think some limitations, rather than restricting the definition of public purpose, I think it's more likely, because that is what they've done in the past, is put restrictions. Meaning, all right, it's in trade now, you have positive list, negative list. So what the Supreme Court is probably going to say is this cannot be public purpose. So it would take the concept of freebies out of the system. So RBI has also given a report to they've actually basically formed a commission after the Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. And so it has individuals from the Finance Commission, RBI, and other institutions in India. And they've asked this commission to submit a report to them. So one of the things RBI has continuously said that this DISCOM issue, free electricity, is creating a huge burden on the states. It's a freebie, but it's creating a huge burden on the states. So we'll have to wait and see what the Supreme Court takes a view on this, about this free electricity. The second problem is the members of parliament, they get subsidized food in the canteen. They get free travel. A lot of the government servants also do. Is that also freebies? Is it for welfare? Or is it freebie? We'll talk about this in the next class. So it would be in relation to the views that have been given on freebies by the Election Commission, the Finance Commission, NHRC, Reserve Bank of India, and others. So the judicial view plus this view would fall under GS. The theoretical perspective would fall under PSI. But it depends on how the question is also framed in that situation. Within PSI, if it's asked in paper 1, section B, so that is polity. So bring them in, the theoretical portion, but only bring in the Supreme Court view of Balaji case and Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. Any doubts on this? So we'll meet in the next class. Right on. RBI in the state of the state reports. RBI in the state of the states report. RBI in the states of the states report. Prepared on the backdrop of the Sri Lankan crisis. Prepared on the backdrop of the Sri Lankan crisis. Mentioned that several Indian states are in a significant debt situation. Which will constrain their ability for public welfare. It is an outcome of freebies. In particular, power subsidies that have caused dire finance situations for DISCOMs, DISCOMs, for DISCOMs. So what the Reserve Bank of India said, it came out with this report, and actually they've mentioned this now in multiple reports, is that this freebie culture that India has, it is causing a situation whereby particular states in India, if they were not part of the larger union, they would have gone through the same financial crisis as Sri Lanka went through. So you look at Kerala, it's going through a financial crisis. Punjab is going through a financial crisis. A primary reason why is because the power subsidies. You have given free electricity to farmers, commercial, well, not so much to commercial establishments, to residential establishments. But the government has to pay the discoms. Right? End of the day, the government does have to pay the discoms who are purchasing electricity from private players or public players. So they have to be paid. But because of these power subsidies, all of this is going out of the government coffers. Money that should have been spent on public welfare, but is now being spent on debt. And it's the same situation that Sri Lanka found itself, whereby 80% of its revenue was just going to China. So COVID hit, the main source of their revenue was tourism, which was badly hit. So the amount of expenditure in terms of debt through the debt trap of China in relation to Hambantota, it completely ballooned, which they were not able to pay back. Then there was the issue of organic farming also that we've talked about when we did India and Sri Lanka. And all of these reasons combined put Sri Lanka into a financial crisis. They were not able to pay for the import of foods or fuel also. So India at that time, I think we started with a four-pronged plan, whereby we gave them about $3 billion also, and we gave them fuel also, we gave them food also. Now they're not in this situation. So Sri Lanka, I think last year, I think in March, a report came out that Sri Lanka has improved massively in terms of its economic crisis. But within India, the states are going through this problem. Why? Because of freebies. Any doubts? Right on the next one. Freebies are not means tested. Freebies are not means tested. Freebies are not means testing. Freebies are not means tested. So any scheme in India, it's means tested. Let's say you want to undertake a free ration, right? Can we have free ration? No, because there is a means to achieve it, or means under which the government would provide you free ration. You have to be a PPL. There are certain other criteria that has to be fulfilled. So to become a beneficiary of any scheme, you have to fulfill the means test. Meaning, after you fall under those conditions, you would become the beneficiary of that scheme. But these freebies are not means tested. So in Karnataka, the free scheme for buses for women, it's not means tested. It's just every woman. So it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, everyone would get this. But every other welfare scheme that India has is generally seen to be means tested. When you give free electricity to farmers in Punjab, you're giving it to both rich farmers and poor farmers. You're also giving it to corporates that undertake farming as a business, and also to those farmers that look at farming as means of sustenance. People who can pay electricity and water charges, they're also being subsidized. So people who are rich enough, who might run 4 ACs, they're also being subsidized. But a person living in urban slums is also being subsidized. So these are freebies are generally not seen to be means tested. And it goes back to the original problem of freebies. Freebies are not meant as a welfare. That's why it's freebies versus welfare. Freebies are meant to get votes. Welfare is meant for the good of the society. And that is where the main problem also emerges. Conceptually, is it clear? Right on the next point. Incentives provided to the elites, are also a form of incentives provided to the elites are also a form of affirmative economic measures. 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 But it is only measures for the poor, but it is only measures for the poor that is considered a freebie. That is considered a freebie, while for the rich, an incentive. While for the rich, an incentive. While for the rich, an incentive. An incentive. So let's say you have a company that is forming a factory within the state. They may be given subsidized electricity also. They're given subsidized purchase of the land also. Why is that an incentive and not a freebie? You're losing opportunity cost also, right? Yeah. Meaning, in the same way that when women are provided with free bus rides, it's an opportunity cost. Like that is also an amount of money that the state can earn, but they're refusing to earn through that. In the same way, when you provide the rich with subsidized land, subsidized electricity, why is that an incentive? Well, when you provide it to the people, it's a freebie. So it's a theoretical problem. In the sense, the conservatives, or you can say capitalism, has made it seem like state handouts, freebies, are bad. While corporates and others, when they're provided with the same level of welfare measures, incentives, it would lead to more economic growth. It would lead to better employment and other aspects. So it's a mindset problem, which comes from conceptual differences. No, separate points. So only the first point is with RBI, rest of them are separate. Like about like providing even to the parliamentarians, free airline rides, cheap canteens, subsidized phones. Why? Why is that not a freebie? Why is that an incentive for the parliamentarian to work better? That is the argument that is made now. There's an incentive for the parliamentarians to function better. It is an aspect of procedural democracy. Why is it not a freebie? Us provided the same thing, the poor provide the same thing, it's a freebie. But for others, it's a incentive. Any doubts? Right on the next point. What? It's about how you frame the measure, right? It's about how you frame the measure. So a capitalist would make the argument that, oh, the incentives that are being provided to me are incentives. The subsidy that is being provided to me for power, the land that is being provided to me as on a subsidized rate, it's an incentive for better economic growth, for better employment. But the same thing when provided to the poor, freebies. Any doubts? Like I still remember, because of the whole GNU incident that happened during the 2000s. So the question was at that time asked, I also got net scholarship, UGC net, initially. Is it a freebie or is it an incentive? That is become, how do you frame? So a lot of people ended up arguing that's a freebie to the extent that, oh, you're at the age when you should be working and becoming a taxpayer rather than you're taking tax money. So it's a freebie that you're being provided rather than being a incentive, so that at least for 5 years, you don't have to worry about how to run your home. You get, the money was also less. Initially was what, I remember my college, university initially giving 10,000 per month, which was enough just for on a personal level, but you can't really raise a family on. You basically are below the poverty line also. But you get the differences. So in that way, anything can be questioned between incentives and freebies. Anyways, it's incentive or freebie, it's a debate. Right on. NHRC, 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 Chairman, NHRC Chairman, Justice Arun Mishra. NHRC Chairman, Justice Arun Mishra. NHRC Chairman, Justice Arun Mishra has said that there should be a law, has said that there should be a law to differentiate, has said that there should be a law to differentiate between legitimate promises, between legitimate promises and freebies, legitimate promises and freebies during elections. That's it. Yes. That's the whole point. If you're going to make law, which aspect? Right. So the Balaji case ended up looking into Amartya Sen's capability approach. But you understand the problem of Amartya Sen's capability approach. Different people have different, for somebody it might be a freebie, for somebody else it might be just an actual incentive in those situations. Right on? Even the idea when you give corporates incentives, it may lead to economic growth. It can lead to greater employment. Maybe that then, because you then provide cheaper electricity, they can compete with the Chinese or the Vietnamese in those situations. Because they do provide subsidized. Right on? The Supreme Court, in the same line, the Supreme Court considers that expenditure by the state, expenditure by the state is whether good or bad, is needed to be debated, in the legislature, and not in the court, is needed to be debated in the legislature and not in the court, So it goes back that whether it's a freebie or public welfare, the court is not the right forum to decide this, because then it would become an aspect of judicial overreach. Because then you're going into executive welfare measures. It's a decision taken by the legislature or by the executive. The court is deciding whether it is good or bad. That is not something that they're meant to do. It would become an aspect of judicial overreach. However, right, the Ashwin case is now being heard by the Supreme Court. So if the Supreme Court does take a view on all of this, then they've gone back on this earlier argument. Right on the next point. NK Singh. Who's the head? Oh, sorry. Who's the chairman? NK Singh, who's the chairman of the 15th Finance Commission? Has argued that there is ambiguity. Over what constitutes freebies. Ambiguity over what constitutes freebies. There is a need to differentiate. Between merit goods. And public goods. There's a need to differentiate between merit goods and public goods, on which expenditure should have an overall benefit. As an overall benefit. Overall benefit. Overall benefit. You understand what a merit good is? Right. A merit good benefits. A merit good benefits the society as a whole, benefits the society as a whole rather than the individual. Society as a whole rather than the individual. 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 So let's say if I make a road in a village, it benefits the complete village. It benefits the complete society. But I provide reservation, I provide PPL, I provide free ration with means tested. It may only benefit few individuals. So what he ends up saying is that go for merit goods over public goods. Public goods in essential that lead to individual goods. Right? Public goods can be both societal and individual. But in this case, so individual goods. Any doubts on this? Right. So if you then give the people televisions, cycles, is it a merit good or a individual good? Not everyone. It's not a merit good because public good in relation to individual. But let's say when we talk about, again, the Karnataka decision to give free rides to women, is it a merit good or a individual public good? Because provided to all women. It's not means tested. It again goes back into the problem, which he ends up saying there's ambiguity. There's ambiguity what is a merit good also and what is a public good, which benefits the individual or which benefits the society at large. It becomes difficult to decide in these situations. Any doubts? No doubts? Right on the last point. The Election Commission of India. The Election Commission of India. The Election Commission of India. The Election Commission of India has called for ethical voting. 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 Whereby the voters vote, whereby the voters vote based on the larger public welfare. Based on the larger public welfare. Rather, larger public welfare. Larger public welfare. Article 282 we talked about in the previous class, right? 282, yeah, for public purposes, right? Just write down then one more line. Separate line. The government is the custodian of public funds. The government is the custodian of public funds and must use them judicially. Guardian of public funds and must use them judiciously. I must use them judiciously. So this particular line, the last line, you can write in the conclusion also. It would not be a problem. And write down separate paragraph, something you can use either in introduction or conclusion. Freebie culture, freebie culture, freebie culture is a debate around fiscal prudence. Freebie culture is a debate around fiscal prudence. Is a debate around fiscal prudence. Fiscal prudence. Fiscal. A universal factor is that nothing is free in the world. A universal factor is that nothing is free in the world. Free in the world. The government should intend for inclusive growth. The government should intend for inclusive growth that develops employment and income generation. Employment and income generation. Welfare should emancipate the people. 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 Basically, make them free. That is what the basic intent of welfare is. Freebies are meant to gather votes. Welfare is meant to help the society. It is meant to help the people. So this is one paragraph you can write in your conclusion or introduction also. It's not a problem. And also then last point you have written that you can also add here. Any doubts on this? So I think no doubts. All right, so we're done with freebies versus welfare. Whether it's asked or not, let's see. But I think we've done so we've done the theories in relation to Rawls, Gramsci, Amartya Sen, and Juvenal, the judicial decisions of the Subraminam Balaji case, and the upcoming Ashwini Kumar Upadhayay case. It is also one of the reasons why the question may be asked in UPSC. Further, the views of RBI, NHRC, Finance Commission, Election Commission of India. Depending on whether it's asked in PSIR or GS, you can answer accordingly and use the points accordingly. Any doubts? No doubts. Write down the next topic. The next topic we'll do is it's not 103rd, right? It's 6th. I think there's a mistake. It's supposed to be 106th. The Women Reservation Act